For people like Luke, one thing isn't working out. They just can't afford a home. Luke's desperately worried, and not just for himself. Even though he's working and doing everything he can, he just can't afford a place to call home for himself and his elderly dad, Colin. Luke and Colin were living in rented accommodation until the place was sold out from under them. Even though Luke was working 5 days a week in a bakery, he just couldn't find another place that they could afford to rent. The two of them, together with their dog Ruby, tried living in a boarding house, but that didn't work out either. It was too unsafe and unaffordable. Some doors they knocked on wouldn't allow Ruby, and they didn't want to give her up. In desperation, with nowhere else to turn to, they started living in a tent. Incredibly, throughout all of this, Luke was still holding down his job. There's a major housing crisis in Australia. Even those with jobs simply can't afford the rent. More and more, people like Luke are being forced into homelessness. Many more are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Thanks to your generosity, dedicated volunteer member Dennis was able to bring some food vouchers and dog biscuits for Ruby. But he knew they needed more than that. Luke, Colin and Ruby needed to get off the streets, and fast, before Colin's health got worse. After much convincing, Dennis arranged for Ruby to be placed into foster care, checked Colin into a hospital, and arranged for Luke to stay in a motel. Shortly after, Dennis arranged for Luke and Colin to move into shared accommodation at a local crisis accommodation centre. Thanks to your kindness, we were able to transform their lives. They started to sleep better, have nutritious meals, and most importantly, feel safe and secure. Your compassion means Colin's health is getting better and Luke is feeling much more hopeful about the future. Right now, Dennis is doing everything he can to help them find a place of their own. This year's St Vincent de Paul Society's Winter Appeal is shining a light on vulnerable people at risk of or experiencing homelessness and those struggling with cost of living pressures, brought on by the drastic lack of affordable housing and soaring demand for rental properties, combined with the rising cost for essentials, groceries and fuel. So many are being pushed over the edge. We are appealing to you, our faithful brothers and sisters, to ensure that thousands of vulnerable people in our community can have a safe place to call home and keep their heads above water. Your gift can help give a hand up to the rising number of vulnerable people who are facing homelessness and poverty by funding food hampers and warm clothing so vulnerable people like Colin and Luke have more money to put towards rent, short-term emergency accommodation so people like Colin don't have to spend another night on the street, basic living essentials like bills and medical expenses so they can be healthy and safe, counselling services and emotional support, and help with long-term accommodation solutions. Your kind gift today will help the St Vincent de Paul Society's local volunteer members to remain on the front line, supporting our most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of the community. You will find donation envelopes in the pews, the foyer, or ask your congregation's St Vincent de Paul Society volunteer member. Please, give generously. On behalf of vulnerable people like Luke and many more, thank you.